Rulings of the Council. This is a series in which we take a look at some of the rulings on the Atomic Mass Forum for individual characters. We'll probably go into a little bit more as the series goes on of going outside of characters, maybe things like cover, stuff like that. But for now, we're going to start with just doing rulings on a character that I've been doing some videos on recently, Anakin Skywalker. So before we jump into that, if you guys do like the content that I am making, please feel free to give me a like, subscribe, or just leave a comment. Let me know what you're thinking, how I can improve and stuff like that. Let's jump into it. And the first ruling we want to talk about, I'm also going to put a little short video on this one because this has actually just changed as the day that I am recording this one because it is kind of outdated. The question that was on here was, what happens if Anakin wounds an enemy primary unit in an opponent's turn with a deflect? Can you move the struggle token even if it's not my turn? The answer was yes at the time. This is from back in 2023. Not long after the game had actually released. The thing to keep in mind here is there has been an update to Anakin's card, so there has been a slight change to this. Let's take a look at how this has changed here. So the update, basically, it reads, due to the update, this is where the fun begins. Because this was about his identity, this is where the fun begins. And I guess I should have said that beforehand. This only occurs during Anakin's activation to move the struggle token. That was changed in the update. So you're no longer able to move that struggle token as a result of the wound of a wound to a unit with deflect, so outside of Anakin's activation. That said, the first sentence of that new one does allow for force refresh and is not stipulated on during Anakin's activation. So if you do wound a unit with, say, deflect, you can refresh a force even if it's outside of your activation. So this is where the fun begins. A little different, but this rule has been updated to where you still get a benefit even if it's not Anakin's activation. Looking at our next submission on the forums is from 2023, so a little bit older. Basically, if Anakin makes a combat action, if the defending unit was wounded, can Anakin follow up? I'm going to end this with to attack the wounded unit again. The answer is yes. You won't put additional damage on that. That is something that at that point in time, you've only put damage from the first attack. But you could put additional conditions on there. Depending on what part of Anakin's card you're looking at, you might actually be able to do some other things, such as maybe if there's you on the side that he do some heals, maybe do some movement jumps, things along those lines, following up with the shoves. There's a lot of things on the card that you might be able to do that you might want to do by attacking that other character to put Anakin into a different position. But keep in mind, you would not be putting that damage back on Anakin. Okay, and looking at the next one, this was interesting. It's a very specific question, but it does lend to timing, and I think that's where this is important, is addressing certain timing issues within the rules forum. So basically the question is, Anakin moves to engagement range to perform a combat action in melee with Savage oppressed. The Savage part somewhat relevant, but not so much. So Anakin and there's the three parts to this question, I should add to that. So Anakin only has 2 strikes to go through on Savage. In this particular case, Savage has 2 expertise. Savage chooses to jump away. Anakin is out of engagement. They're asking, can Anakin use force jump to use I'm going to end this? That's the first question. We'll get to that. We'll get to the answers to all of these questions in following slides. The second question is, Anakin has 3 crits go through, and Savage has 2 expertise again. Anakin is on stance 1, deals 6 damage, 7 with protection, and gives a strain. Does Anakin's strain happen first, and does Savage then take 3 damage if he jumps away? And then the third part to this question, Anakin has 4 strikes and a crit go through, and Savage has 2 expertise. This time Anakin chooses a pin. Can Savage still jump away if Anakin chooses jump? Instead, does he execute his jump before Savage? So a lot of good timing questions here, not necessarily relevant in a lot of things, but there is timing questions here that are really good to address. So let's take a look at the answers to all of these questions. Okay, so to answer the first question, again, going back to that one was, can Anakin use his force jump before using I'm going to end this? And this is going to be a constant here. The answer is no, because force jump is an active ability, so that would take place after the attack resolves. In this case, I'm going to end this is a reactive ability and must be done directly after a combat action. So because you are doing a active ability before you did that reactive ability, the timing window the trigger is no longer being met, and you wouldn't be able to do that. So Anakin is not able to jump into range using that active ability of force jump. There is other ways that he can do this, but using that active ability of force jump won't get you there. Let's look at the rest of this question. All right, now going to the second part of the question, does a strain happen before Savage does his jump away? So in the timing chart, yes, the strain would be applied at step 8 of the attack sequence, where and then Savage's expertise jump results in 10B. So you would apply the strain, and then Savage would have the opportunity to jump, taking the 3 damage and removing the strain. So something to keep in mind there. If you have an ability that would happen from the expertise chart. So really good timing issue there as well. And let's look at the third part of this question. All right, and the third part, basically, can Savage still jump if he's pinned? And this applies just the same way. The pin would be applied at step 8, and the jump would happen at 10B. So again, he could jump, but all it would do is remove that pin, which is a nice way to do it. I mean, you could just jump to remove the pin, but it wouldn't remain on him. Anakin's jump would also apply at step 8 if he chooses that option instead, was the second part of that question. So if Anakin instead chooses to execute the jump instead of the pin, he could jump, but he would jump before Savage, meaning Savage could jump a completely different direction, which is important because if he was I'm going to end this to try and use that second attack, Savage has the opportunity to still jump away from where he would be. Even if he was base to base, he could potentially jump out of that range. So something to keep in mind. If that were probably if you were wanting to, I'm going to end this into Savage in this particular scenario, you definitely would want to put the pin on him so that you were not jumping, giving him the opportunity to jump out of combat range. So something to keep in mind here when you're looking at doing some of these combats and when things trigger and when they don't. All right, and here's another question that is kind of an interesting one, and it has a situation and a question. So that just to get the idea of what the situation was for this question, Anakin Skywalker with 9 damage on him performs a combat action, choosing to do a melee attack into Asajj Ventress. Anakin rolls a failure, and it does some damage to Asajj. During step 10D, Asajj uses a riposte to deal 2 damage to Anakin. Can Anakin still use I'm going to end this even though he is now wounded? In a wounded state, once the combat action is completed, ends his activation. So this one, I think probably by this point in time, some people know, but let's go ahead and jump in and take a look at what the answer is. Again, older question from back in 2023. And the answer to this one is it does not. When a unit's activation ends preemptively on account of that unit becoming wounded, it forfeits any remaining actions. And I think a lot of us are probably familiar with this due to Jango Fett and how he used to be with Not So Fast, which is now definitely changed. But this would, in situations like this with that riposte, if it was to do that damage to end any unit's activation by wounding them, this would be the same thing. You wouldn't be able to do any reactive or any other abilities. Your activation just ends at that point in time. All right, let's take a look at, I think we have 2 more questions here. Let's take a look at those. All right, and we're getting into 2 questions that have come up just recently within the last 6 months or so. Actually, less than that, probably about the last 3 to 4 months. So let's take a look at this one. Zeus basically asks here, when Anakin flips his stance using I'm going to end this, does that count against 1 stance flip per turn limit? So if you remember in the in the rule book, it does say you can flip your stance card anytime at once per turn. So let's take a look at what the answer is here. And the answer is pretty straightforward. Flipping your stance card is limited to once per activation. I'm going to end this. Doesn't override that limit. If it just allows to be done at a different time other than otherwise you could. And there's a stipulation here. So it does say any time you can flip your stance card. That is not 100% true. You can flip your stance card whenever you're not in the middle of another action. So you couldn't, if you're doing an attack, you wouldn't normally be able to just flip your card, because remember, there cannot be another action taken in between your ending an attack and going into I'm going to end this. So this is kind of in the middle of that. So you wouldn't be able to necessarily do that. This, though, allows you to do that, and it allows you to take advantage of making that flip. So you can do it anytime as long as you're not in the middle of another action, but this allows it kind of in the middle of an action to go ahead and flip that stance card. Let's take a look at our last rule that we have to kind of go over here. All right, and the last question here is fairly recent, again, coming from Darth Poos. It says, when General Anakin Skywalker attacks an enemy and an ARF clone support is within range 5, it allows for that supporting fire dash. And I'm going to end this specifically is the effect refers to the supporting fire, in supporting fire, the attack or the combat action. So basically trying to get clarification of when these go off. And I think like a lot of us now that we've been playing Anakin for a while are familiar with this, but let's take a look at what the official ruling was. So basically what happens is the event and the effect are kind of different. So for coordinated fire, supporting fire, however you want to look at it, the event is the attack. And the event for I'm going to end this is the combat, is the combat action. So there's a little bit of a nuance there in regards to the attack versus the combat action, and when those things when the effects that trigger those would go off. So basically just keep in mind that coordinated fire, supporting fire definitely takes place is a trigger. The trigger for that is the attack itself. Where I'm going to end this is the end of the combat action. So there's a couple of different terminology there that we have to be aware of, but at the end of the day, you can definitely use both of those in conjunction with one, because one is a combat action and the other one is the attack. So they're different triggering events, not the same, and that's the most important part. So let me go ahead and kind of just finish out here, and then we'll go and disclose everything out for you. So that's just some of the rules that I found kind of interesting for Anakin Skywalker. Just a quick video here to kind of go over those. I do make some shorts as well to kind of just definitely give everybody something a little bit faster maybe. But I just only wanted to put these out there so that everyone had these available to kind of look at if you weren't aware of them. Some people may, some people may not. I know that they're not all of us like dive deep into the forums and look at everything. So if you have questions about maybe some of the rules that apply to some of the characters that you are playing, I'm going to try and put some of those together out here. So hopefully you will enjoy those. If you like it, like I said, give me a like, subscribe, let me know what you think. Other than that, as always, thank you very much for watching. Have a good one.